I think it's safe to assume that we are living in one of the most difficult times in recent memory, still reeling from the effects of the financial crisis. The economy is still struggling. Companies are downsizing their workers. People are losing their jobs, or the threat of job loss hangs over their heads. It's a bleak outlook for some of those who are unemployed. The price of gasoline and consumer goods continues to rise, even though very few workers have received raises in some time. Who would take the chance of approaching a superior for a raise at this point in time? Since there is very little that we can do to change what has happened, we must learn to cope with it. Hello once again, I'm Don Jackson with the heartbeat of the internet. Someone once said, peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with it. Charles Hanson Towne wrote, I need so much the quiet of your love after the day's loud strife. I need your calm, all other things above, after the stress of life. I crave the haven that in your dear heart lies after all toil is done. I need the starshine of your heavenly eyes after the day's great sun. The way most of us cope with the incredible stress we are under is to come home and just close the door on all this craziness. We look to our mates and our families for the strength to carry on. Even just a few hours of respite from all the pressures we face every day is enough to recharge our batteries, allowing us to cope with whatever life puts in our way. But this has always been a coping mechanism for people through the ages. Consider this from the ancient Sanskrit. Although I conquer all the earth, yet for me there is only one city. In that city, there is for me only one house, and in that house, one room only, and in that room, a bed, and one woman sleeps there, the shining joy and jewel of all my kingdom. This was sent to me some years back. It still has meaning today. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile, but you have to sigh. When care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't quit. Success is a failure turned inside out, the silver tint of clouds of doubt, and you can never tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems afar. So stick to the fight when your heart is hit. It's when things go wrong that you mustn't quit. Marla Grant was once quoted as saying, "Fate is what shows up in your life. Your destiny is determined by how you react to it." The way we cope is often a direct result of our negative thoughts. For example, if you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you want to win but think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For out of the world we find, success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in a state of mind. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger and faster man. But sooner or later, the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. Sylvia Ogden Peterson, in her book From Love That Hurts to Love That's Real, wrote, and I quote, "Life isn't a rose garden for anyone all the time. We all experience periods when we would just as soon throw in the towel. When life has dealt us too many blows too quickly and frustration and fatigue overwhelm us. When life's problems seem more than we can handle. But the real person treats these temporary low feelings as just what they are, momentary crises, and knows he or she will emerge as a whole being." End quote. And Merle Shane, in her bestseller, When Lovers Are Friends, wrote, and again I quote, "There are really only two ways to approach life, as victim or as gallant fighter. And you must decide if you want to act or react, deal your own cards, or play with a stacked deck. And if you don't decide which way to play with life, it always plays with you." A lot of people forget that, so they scan the books that tell you how to make people respond as you'd have them do, or look for someone to protect them from the world. But the fact is that nothing works, but to learn to trust yourself and to understand that each encounter makes you stronger, even the ones you lose. I'm Don Jackson with the heartbeat of the Internet. We have all known moments of apartness and empty loneliness. Embracing that reality is essential if we are to cope effectively. That's an excerpt from How to Survive the Business of Living by Karen Kaiser Clark from the Center for Executive Planning. The poet Rabindranath Tagore wrote, "It is the pang of separation that spreads throughout the world and gives birth to shapes innumerable in the infinite sky. It is this sorrow of separation that gazes in silence all night from star to star and becomes lyric among rustling leaves in rainy darkness of July. It is this overspreading pain that deepens into loves and desires, into sufferings and joys in human homes. And this is it that ever melts and flows in songs through my poet's heart." An excerpt from Gitanjali, Song Offering. Consider the great Nobel Prize-winning poet Rabindranath Tagore, who lived through an unimaginable loss. He lost his wife, son, and daughter in a very short period of time. This kind of loss would be enough to bring down even the strongest individual, but Tagore was determined to be strong and to give his years of sadness a voice. He channeled his grief into his writing. It was his coping mechanism to try to come to terms with his terrible losses. I remember the cheerful face of an 8-year-old boy who was one of the victims of the Boston Marathon bombings. He died at the time of the blast. His mother was in hospital because of her injuries suffered at the hands of these terrorists. Her husband issued a statement that asked for the media to show some compassion while his family was trying to cope with everything that happened. We do have compassion for those who suffered through this senseless act of terrorism. We hope and pray that each family will find the strength to cope and to carry on with their lives. And our thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. Have you seen the motion picture What Dreams May Come that starred Robin Williams? For a comedian, he has starred in many dramatic roles that have shown how great an actor he truly is. The movie is a tragic story that gives us all hope for what is to come after death. It was based on the novel by Richard Matheson, screenplay by Ron Bass, and directed by Vincent Ward. Now, it is an extremely difficult writing to translate into images on the screen, but the director's vision and the cinematography was breathtaking. One can only imagine what the female lead must have felt after losing her children, and then her husband, and why she chose to end her life. Rabindranath Tagore lived with the grief for the rest of his life and gave his sorrow a voice in his poetry. This is a very powerful writing. It is called The Pencil Box. It was written by Doris Sanford and included in Chicken Soup for the Mother's Soul 2. Sanford wrote, and I quote, "I was deep in thought at my office, preparing a lecture to be given that evening at a college across town when the phone rang. A woman I had never met introduced herself and said that she was the mother of a 7-year-old and that she was dying. She said that her therapist had advised her that discussing her pending death with her son would be too traumatic for him. But somehow, that didn't feel right to her. Knowing that I worked with grieving children, she asked my advice. I told her that our heart is often smarter than our brain, and that I thought she knew what would be best for her son. I also invited her to attend the lecture that night, since I was speaking about how children cope with death. She said she would be there. I wondered later if I would recognize her at the lecture, but my question was answered when I saw a frail woman being half carried into the room by 2 adults. I talked about the fact that children usually sense the truth long before they are told, and that they often wait until they feel adults are ready to talk about it before sharing their concerns and questions. I said that children usually handle truth better than denial, even though the denial is intended to protect them from pain. I said that respecting children meant including them in the family sadness, not shutting them out. She had heard enough. At the break, she hobbled to the podium, and through her tears, she said, "I knew it in my heart. I just knew I should tell him," she said. She said she would tell him that night. The next morning, I received another phone call from her. She could hardly talk, but I managed to hear the story through her choked voice. She had awakened him when they got home the night before and quietly said, "Derek, something to tell you." He quickly interrupted her, saying, "Mummy, is it now that you're going to tell me that you are dying?" She held him close, and they both sobbed while she said, "Yes." After a few minutes, the little boy wanted down. He said that he had something for her that he'd been saving. In the back of one of his drawers was a dirty pencil box. Inside the box was a letter written in simple scrawl. It said, "Goodbye, Mum. I will always love you." How long he had been waiting to hear the truth, I don't know. I do know that 2 days later, the young mother died. In her casket was placed a dirty pencil box and a letter. Of course, some of the greatest stress comes with illness, our own or the illness of a friend or family member. This is a prayer from Sicily that asks for help in dealing or coping with pain. I feel that a dragon has been using my body as his den. His snortings and convulsions are painful to me, and the pain has taken me to the brink of hopelessness. Please help me in any of these ways. May the dragon leave my body on a whim. May his visits become shorter. May I learn that he can be tolerated if only I can gain the strength to tame him. May I gain the strength to tame him. May my rescuers work well and drive the dragon from my body with God's blessing. May I understand at last that there never was any dragon. It was only one part of my body sending to another part of my body urgent messages in my sickness. An excerpt from a collection called The Bridge of Stars, edited by Marcus Braybrook. And this has got to be one of the simplest ways to cope with just about anything. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Have a great day and a good night filled with many sweet dreams. I'm Don J.